This is another video where I'm taking a bunch of notes and dumping them on the internet. Flash holes, airsoft, and paintballs. Airsoft shotguns are bordering on paintball guns. They're designed to look and act a lot like the real thing, but they go and then throw pellets or round balls, rubber balls, whatever. And they border, not just border, but really do get into the point of being, legit painful to be hit by things like a paintball gun. One of them that you can get is a fake 12-gauge shotgun that has a shell that does not fit and a mechanism that doesn't have a suddenly forcefully hitting firing pin and hammer. It just pushes forward. When you pull on the trigger, it just goes doinky, doinky. And it pushes on a push button on the back of a cartridge, so it sets off the gas and shoots pellets or shoots a slug. The slug diameter is 17 millimeter or 67 caliber. It's a slug. This comes out of a 17.3 millimeter muzzle or variations. Paintballs have the same kind of concept where they have variations in diameter because paintball cartridges and paintballs don't follow strict standards. The breech of that type of thing uses a 19.5 millimeter hole. It's not going to fit a shotgun shell, or at least not a conventional 12 gauge. APS, CIM, 870, or SAI MK1 shotgun shells for airsoft. Or is it paintball? Is it getting blurred? I don't know. Paintball is specifically the large slugs. Airsoft can do anything. I wonder when there'll be a hybrid gun. Oops, too late. There already is. Flash holes. Almost all ammunition, instead of a push button that just releases air, has something called a primer. This is a very tiny amount of a high explosive, so you can get a really hard to set off arranged little thing to contain it, the metal that's involved in the primer. And it uses a really tiny amount of a high explosive so that it can initiate anything from gunpowder to smokeless propellant. The idea is you use a really extreme but very tiny explosion to initiate it, to light it off. The hole that it goes through after the, it can be it can be a large or small pistol primer, or it can be a shotgun primer that's 0.24 inches across, that sort of thing, all the way down to little ones. It has to go through a really small hole so that the pressure from it, from the propellant doesn't shoot it out the back of the cartridge. So it uses a really tiny hole for it. This causes it to produce a jet that'll push through most of the propellant and ignite it all at once. And it also has to be small enough that the propellant has a hard time getting in, but most primers have a little disc of paper on them, if possible, to make sure that they don't jam up the works or cause a pressure spike or something strange like that, because you could have the initial blast, but the propellant might burn over a longer period of time and build up even more pressure by plugging that hole. Not all of them do the paper cover thing. The diameter for the flash hole can be 1.4 millimeter up to 3 millimeter, depending on what you're dealing with. Pistol, rifle, shotgun, doesn't matter. The diameter is usually set by them wanting to make sure a certain type of powder is used. Now we're going to talk about, I'm going to do this rest of the video, on the phenomena that's on its head. Let's discuss the history of the National Firearms Act and where it really came from. Like most rules that are passed that have really confusing language in it, you have to look up every single draft of it. And I'm not going to go do that. The original NFA from 1934, as originally drafted, wanted to put a $200 tax stamp on anything they wanted to make illegal, but weren't able to. Because on a federal level, what they had is a rule that they had to tax things, and then they could punish you for not paying a tax. They could regulate things and tax them, but they couldn't outright ban them. This is also why, at one time, the federal government couldn't outlaw all sorts of things. Illegal pornography, various drugs. New laws had to be created so that they had the right to regulate a damn thing. Before 1910, the U.S. government was severely regulated, not the other way around. Its original draft was to put a $200 tax stamp on anything that they found particularly suitable for criminal activity. I'm mocking the rule that says we provide a sporting exemption for anything that is considered particularly amenable are applicable to sporting usage, like hunting, skeet shooting, target shooting, that sort of thing. Well, anything particularly used for criminal activity was supposed to be outlawed. And along with that, they also decided to outlaw things that only really were useful for war. They decided to outlaw machine guns. This is the one everybody knows about. It's also the one that virtually no one has a problem with being in place. It seems like a rational thing because machine guns are pretty indiscriminate if you can't control them easily. Your average pistol that shoots one shot every time you pull the trigger is very controllable. Same thing with a rifle, even more controllable. Even a shotgun that's called a scattergun is more controllable than a machine gun for a first-time user. And this was kind of the cutoff point. And also, it doesn't have much of a sporting use. It's fun to shoot, and you can legally have one. It's a $200 tax stamp for a machine gun. But they also threw in hand grenades. There's a joke there. And the original reason for the NFA, 1934. Something else that they noticed criminals preferred. For a specific reason they didn't want to discuss, and they weren't able to regulate it, but they tried to. They wanted to outlaw handguns. Not rifles and shotguns. Handguns. But it's about concealability, isn't it? No, they were just outlawing handguns. This was an anti-handgun law. It threw in machine guns for what most of us consider kind of a practical reason. And hand grenades because they're for mass damage. They're considered a destructive device. Machine guns aren't considered destructive devices, oddly enough. The destructive device thing is for explosives, to be regulated. You know, fireworks are destructive devices. They're a type of explosive. They're mortars. But this was a ban on handguns because they found that criminals liked them. But the problem was, virtually everybody who owned any kind of gun that they weren't going to regulate also owned a handgun. And most of the people in the room making the law had handguns. And making it to where you had a $200 tax stamp, you know, an upper middle class concealable firearms rule, keeping the poor from having handguns. That was really obvious because they started discussing this openly. And it was part of public record. And they were fucked. But they put a bunch of wording in it because not only did they want to ban handguns, they wanted to make you not able to make one from a rifle or a shotgun or any other long gun or any other device. Repurposing a flare gun was against the rules too because it would make a pistol. Not because it would make an illegal pistol, just a pistol or a handgun or a revolver. Yes, you can make a flare gun into a revolver. I made a design for that. Here we go. Anything favored by criminals at the time was against the rules. A great deal of language was inserted to prevent people from creating handguns out of long guns, rifles, or shotguns. Any long gun, any kind of gun. The bill wouldn't pass with handguns in the highly regulated category as originally intended, and the entire purpose of it, because they were trying to get rid of criminals' ability to legally have a gun, because you couldn't arrest them for having a gun that was suspicious, and they wanted to outlaw the guns. It just made them crazy about it. And they wanted to get rid of handguns. This is a handgun ban, effectively. Only rich people are the ones that aren't regulated because they can afford to pay the taxes. Anyway, they were moved to the ordinary firearm category. But all of these anti-handgun rules, which you might have suspected what it was about, were left on books. Now, how do you get around anti-handgun rules with the NFA? Simple, because they made an exemption for anything like a handgun. People would just make handguns, turning it on its head. This has been a project, a hack, that's been going on for a very long time. All the odd language was designed to prevent cutting down long guns remained in place. And this cutting down, altering, or designing, or intending to build, meaning if you were just making something, became a contentious point instead of just admitting this was an attempt to ban handguns and we need to get rid of this bullshit rulings. Nope, that's not how the government works. Any other weapon means any weapon or device capable of being concealed on the person. Yeah, handguns. But it won't include pistols or revolvers or handguns having rifled bores because smooth bores were uncommon, and this kept you from cutting down a shotgun. And originally intended to be fired from the shoulder was for shotguns and rifles. But what if you originally designed it as a pistol, a really long-barreled pistol? Well, we can't lie and say that that was intentionally... Okay, but you can't have a smooth bore. All this did was make it to where you couldn't have a smoothbore weapon. Is that a problem? If you're firing buckshot and you use rifling, that makes it to where it's less precise. That means if you're aiming at me, you might hit somebody to the side with a pellet, and that'll kill them. Forcing rifling on a pistol that's got a short barrel makes it even worse. So this effectively made one of the best self-defense rounds on Earth illegal in a pistol. Oh, wait a minute. We'll just design a pistol with rifling that doesn't fucking work very well, because there's no rule that says you can't make a gun with a bad barrel. Making it have rifling, but the rifling is at the end of the barrel and it's double the bore, it's just a muzzle device at this point, not illegal at all. So you could use a 45 Colt chamber that was 3 inches deep and put a 410 shotgun shell in it. And the destructive device ruling on over 50 caliber was based on firing grenades. They wanted to outlaw anything that could shoot a grenade, so they decided half-inch grenades weren't dangerous enough, so they decided half-inch grenades were okay. So you could have a half-inch bore. And 12-gauge shotguns could never be loaded with a... Yes, of course, they could be loaded with hand grenades. Same thing with flare guns. In fact, the average flare gun is actually a grenade gun. It's just repurposed for firing flares. But there's a $5 tax stamp on AOWs. Well, that's okay. You can get yourself one of these things and just fill out the forms. You're a registered gun owner with the federal government. Okay, it's gun registration. That's a minor form of... Yeah, but it's $200 if you want to make one. It's only $5 extra tax, but the person that makes it has to pay $200 for each one of them to the federal government as a sin tax. Again, only the rich or the industrialized, military industrial complex can make these cheaply enough, because they can get a bulk deal and say, yeah, you can just pay this flat amount. You don't have to pay $200 each. Some are more equal than others. There's a mandatory tax if I want to make a flare gun that's metal, they can fire a shotgun shell. $200 plus $5 if I send it or sell it. That's it. It's considered an AOW. Why isn't it considered something like the other things? It's just a smooth barrel pistol because it's intended to be fired by one hand. If I can't shoulder it, or if it was never designed that way, it's not considered a cut down anything. This really twisted logic setup was done again because they wanted to make one law and then they were stuck with another one. Stockless pistol grip only 12-gauge firearm. If it's under 26 inches, it's a smoothbore handgun. It's an AOW. As long as you don't put anything else on it, as long as it's very much a pistol. If it's over 26 inches long, doesn't have a stock, has a pistol grip, and it's 12-gauge, it's under the no tax class. It doesn't matter in each case what the barrel length is. It's the body length. You can have a barrel length that isn't there. It can just be the chamber, and it can be on the end of a long handle. As long as it's integrated in the mechanism for firing it some way, it's perfectly legal. Even if the barrel's under 18 or 16 inches, it must maintain an overall length of 26 inches to lose any tax restriction, and you can make it. If you make it under 26 inches, it's $200 to make it and $5 to buy and sell it, and you can freely buy and sell it, as long as they're willing to go through a federal background check, bypassing local and state laws very easily. When fitted with a short length barrel, something extends the overall length, and if you have a long grip, some kinds of firearms barrel could be just the chamber. If you ever attach a stock to it, it cannot be converted back to a firearm that way, and thus has been redesigned as a shotgun or a rifle. And then the ATF lost that rule 3 times now that I've counted, but they keep trying to enforce it because they don't want you to be able to have one firearm that can be taxed. The lower can be just left the way it is. It doesn't have to have any particular barrel or anything. It could be designed for smoothbore or rifle bore. It could be large or small bore. It could have a pistol grip or a buttstock. Oh, wait a minute, that's actually completely legal. So if you design it that way, where it doesn't have any of the parts specific, it also gets around the rule. All of these rules ended up creating not loopholes, but people trying to follow this warped, twisted language they wouldn't remove because originally they were trying to ban handguns. Handguns were, are, and always will be the most commonly used weapons for murder and for suicide. Suicide outranking at 2 to 1. It's the most commonly used weapon for any form of criminal activity. But let's keep talking about now the thing that ATF hates most, people making pistols out of AR-15s. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.